Hello and welcome to Stage Perspective. My name is Charles Peters, and I'm very happy to have a friend and an amazing actor and director and author on the show today, Duane Daniels. How are you, Duane?
I'm good, Charles. Happy to be here. I've been looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, my whole caveat of the show has always been what got me started, and I've told this story a couple of times, is I was sitting in a room and I looked around the room and I go, wow, I've worked with everybody in this room in some capacity. It was a strange feeling. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna start with people that I've worked with. Now, some of those connections are a little tenuous, maybe a couple of times, but you and I, we have a lot of history.
We
So
have trod the boards.
we have, yes, and I mean, I couldn't even count how many shows we did together because we just, you were already doing the show Triple Espresso, which I've talked about before. Which you see the poster behind me,
Hey,
which was out in front of the Horton Grand Theater here in San Diego. But I started in 2004, and then in 2000, towards the end of that, I came to San Diego and then did the show for 3 years here until 2008. And you were in and out, but and then we did Pittsburgh together and probably some other stuff. Yeah. And I
yeah,
know you
yeah, we probably have done maybe 1,000 performances together.
probably, yeah, it's a blur. So,
Almost. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's a lot
Uh,
of time. That's a lot of time with you on my stage left and me.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny when you work with somebody, I mean, it's kind of like it is like a job because, I mean, we had a great schedule here. I always tell people wasn't the Broadway schedule like other shows in other cities, but we the Broadway show Tuesday through Saturday, two matinee, a matinee on Saturday, a matinee on Sunday. But we had a nice schedule: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday matinee, and we were done. So we had Monday, Tuesday off. We didn't have to be back till Wednesday. Did you ever experience burnout? I mean, as much as we did the show together.
Yeah, I think, I did the show for, I think, 12 years.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, not all 52 weeks
Solidly.
a year, but
Right.
like 40 weeks a year,
Yeah.
44 weeks a year.
Right.
So yeah, I did. I think that over the course of that show, I experienced like every single possible up and down that
Yeah.
you can get, being a performer. I hate this. I love this. I'm sick of
Hmm.
it. I can't wait to do it. It's like every single possible approach to like today's performance. I think at some point,
Yeah.
I felt that. I don't know if we all did, but it, and then ultimately, like at some point, I realized it had nothing to do with the show. It just had everything to do with me.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
the thing. My sister would remind me of that. She goes, "No one can take your joy away. No one can govern how you deal with stuff. It's all about you and how your perspective." And that really helped because I would go in. There would be days where like I would be mad at a performer, or I'd be upset about how this was being handled, or they weren't doing this right. And it's all about your perspective. A lot of it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
completely. Yeah,
yeah,
I tried. I think I really settled in after about I don't know 7 or 8 years of doing the
yeah,
show. I felt like
yeah.
I finally settled into a place where my discipline got better, and I was just like trying to appreciate every day.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. And I would get upset with performers like, what a gift. I mean, it is what it is, but I mean, what a gift to be in anything that pays well and runs long. We
Our
were,
job was to look at people laughing. You know what I mean? It was like
yeah,
it was such a blessing. And one time I counted the laughs in that show. One time I had like a recording of some kind, and I actually
interesting.
counted the laugh, and there were like 400 laughs in
Yeah,
the show.
yeah, yeah.
100, some little, some big, but like that's really incredible. To like
Hmm.
that was our job, was to like get laughter and like
Yeah,
live and bask in that glow of people laughing and appreciating us. It's like, looking back on it now, it's like it's pretty hard to think that I was ever justified in like, like having a bad day.
right. Yeah. It's like people, it's a blessing and a curse in a way, but yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. But you were also doing stuff, during that time, which I know you talked about that. Because your theater, the Fritz Theater, was like really right behind the Grand, and you would walk over, and you go back and forth. It's very convenient. So,
It was
yeah.
lovely. My other theater was like 200 feet upstage, you know. And if we got a 10-minute break, I could go over to my theater and check the messages to see if we sold any tickets.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was basically like where the old, it's not even there anymore. The Candela's was, if you look that up. It was like sort of near the Chinese museum. Is that right? Kind of next to
Yeah.
that, or yeah.
Now it's like a fine liquor place,
Right.
like
Yeah.
high end liqueurs and whatever.
Right.
That's what it is now. Yeah.
And I remember Jen, my wife, telling me about not having any work lights, and you guys would just open the roof to
Yeah.
work. To
Skyline. Yeah.
light, yeah, which you used in shows, because she told me about one show where like you guys came down on lines from the roof line and stuff. So
We,
yeah,
we had all kinds of craziness going on at that theater. 18 years the Fritz Theater was, it wasn't always in that building, but that's how long the entity ran. Yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
and not to mention the Fritz Blitz, which was what'd you do, like 20 plays or short plays and some long,
Yeah, it was a lot of
some full
short
length.
summer festival, 4 weeks of new works.
Wow,
It would usually
yeah,
be 12 or 15 different scripts, different writers,
yeah,
different casts. Yeah, it
yeah.
was a big undertaking for sure.
Yeah, we miss it
Yeah.
here. We miss it here in San Diego because we don't really have that. There were a few people trying to start things like that, but it never really. There's a few little festivals. There's a few little things where people do nothing like that anymore. We haven't seen that here. So yeah,
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 those were some crazy years, and I look back on all that time really fondly. It was such a
yeah,
beautiful time for me. Yeah.
yeah. And it was different.
Yeah.
I mean, you were able to do that. I don't know if you could do what you did back then now. It'd be different. So uh,
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't try it again, I don't think.
no,
Yeah.
mm-mm,
Yeah.
no. Now, this is a big question. How did you get started? Now, I have to say, you just have to go to Duane's IMDb, and he has a website as well, which we'll put up in the links. But to look at his stage experience, because you're primarily started on stage, but he also, if you didn't know, played the principal. I forget the principal's name. Van something.
Ben Clemens.
Then Clemens, that's right, on Veronica Mars. You were also on a show that shot here in San Diego called Terriers. You have a ton of shorts. You've got television credits and so forth. But I think your big credits, like Veronica Mars, you were in the series
Mhm,
early on, and then you also did the movie not too long
mhm.
ago.
Yeah,
And
and
you,
the final episode, which was only like 4 years ago
yeah, yeah,
on Hulu. Yeah, I was in the final episode, the first and the final, and a bunch in between. So
there you go.
yeah,
Yeah,
my character lived all the way to the end.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And
Yeah.
then, of course, we talked about Triple Espresso, which was a show that ran here in San Diego for like 11 years. It was like 12 years in Minneapolis. And you travel like I did with the show. You went, I think I know you went to Pittsburgh because we were there together, and you did Des Moines and a bunch of other cities. It ran like in 50 cities, throughout the United States and so forth.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to
I got
Ireland?
yeah, I did Dublin for like 9 months.
Yeah. So I mean, you just your body of work is extremely impressive. But how did you get started? What is it that got you started on stage? I assume that's where you sort of got your start.
Yeah, definitely. I since I was little, that's just kind of all I ever wanted to do. I used to, from my elementary school, I used to walk home for lunch, and at lunchtime uh every day they had reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Mm,
And I watched Dick Van Dyke on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and I was like, that right there, that's what I want to
yeah,
do.
I
And
get
then I
that.
ended up being tall and skinny, and kind of funny physically and whatever. And so he was a huge inspiration for me.
Mm, mm,
And then, you know, a story I sometimes tell is, I think the only time my mom ever took me to see a play was she took me to the Cleveland Playhouse. I grew up in Cleveland.
mhm.
She took me to the Cleveland Playhouse, and we saw Arsenic and Old Lace.
Mm.
Right? You know that show?
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was like 60 whatever. And I watched the show, and I was like enamored, and it was all great and everything. And then at curtain call, Charles, after all the main characters came out and took their bows, they all like indicated stage left, and the door to the cellar opened, and 13 old men came out and took a bow.
Huh.
And you remember, that's all the bodies that are buried in the basement.
Oh right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it blew my mind.
Huh.
was absolutely transformed, transfixed, and I was just, this is it for me. And I actually went. I was in fourth grade, and I went and got some friends of mine in my class together, and I I staged Arsenic and Old Lace. I didn't have a script, but
Right.
I remembered, and I said, "Okay, you're Teddy, and you're so and so," and then we did a play in my classroom. It was just Arsenic and Old Lace, which was just my memory of the play.
Right. As
So that was
told
my
by.
right. That was my first directing job.
There you
It was
go.
fourth grade.
Who did you play?
I was Mortimer, sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever do it like years later?
Never did the play.
Yeah, that's funny.
Never been in it.
Hmm.
No, no.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now I'd play like one of the cops or whatever because I'm older, you know.
Right.
But it was yeah, that really changed me for sure,
Huh.
in a good way. And then I just began pursuing. I did some school plays, whatever. I dropped out of school like when I was 16.
Yeah.
Started working in the chorus here and there, and did shows, and just anybody that would let me be in their play, I would do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I just never stopped. To this day, I'm still
Huh.
doing that. You
You
know.
and I share that in common because I didn't finish either. I ended up
Oh,
going to college.
huh.
Uh, I ended up I ended up getting like a grant and getting all this scholarship stuff and figured out how to get. I got paperwork to get me into college, so I did a couple of years of college. But then after I went, this is just not for me. I
I
just
had no idea. I don't think I
yeah.
knew that about
No, it's not something I tell people. So
you. Right. Well,
it's
you
like,
did today.
by the way,
Yeah,
hi, high
it's
school
out there.
dropout.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you and I share that in common. Yeah, I think it was like my soft my junior year. It's kind of like it crumbled in my junior year. It was really bad
Yeah.
because nobody like paid attention. Nobody like grabbed you by the scruff of the neck and went, "Hey, what are you doing?" It was just like everything was kind of falling apart, and suddenly I was pulled in the office and I go, "We don't want you coming here anymore." I'm like, "Okay,
Totally. That's
fine."
kind of what they said to me too. They're like, you never go to class. The only thing I would do was I would get there in the morning, and then I would go and I would hang out in the auditorium, the theater space, the entire day. I'd go to my choir class
Yeah.
and come back and just hang out in the theater the whole day. And pretty soon they said, "Hey, we're not going to let you come back if you keep this up." And I'm like, "That's the best news I've ever heard."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, kids, if you're watching, it's just about the consequences. But depending on what you do, there may not be consequences. So I don't know. I
No,
haven't suffered any. So
yeah. The only, there's been a few times I've been asked at some job application or whatever,
right,
or for if I grad, do I have a high school diploma? I always just said yes, and no one ever
yeah,
like checked,
that's what
so
I do. It's just easier than trying to trying to figure it out. Um,
totally.
so uh, you you also the other thing I discovered is that you sang, and I don't think I knew this about you. I knew that you sang because you sing and I've seen you sing in shows and stuff, but I don't know that I knew you sang opera for a while.
I did. I sang 2 seasons with the San Diego Opera.
Oh
Yeah,
wow, wow.
yeah, sure did. Yeah, I was thinking about that just the other day. Martin Wright was the conductor at the time, and
Mhm.
he brought me on board, and yeah, I had a I I'm glad I sang opera. It wasn't as fun as musical theater. Musical theater is a lot more fun. Opera is really pretty serious,
Mhm.
and then like also really stressful. So I decided kind of to get away from opera and just kind of stick to musical theater.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
another thing we share in common. I did when I was little, when I was in the Texas Boys Choir, so I sang in like Tosca, Carmen, La Boheme,
Okay.
Leonard Bernstein's Mass. We
Right.
did those. Of course, we always played the street urchins. You know,
Okay. Sure.
because there
Yeah.
were street
Yeah.
urchins in all of those, except for Leonard Bernstein's Mass. But yeah, so but I
Yeah.
did a lot of that when I was younger. So I've got that. I think it's was extremely helpful uh, for support. Probably same for you. Is it growing up singing, it teaches you how to do breath support and so forth. So
Yeah. Yeah. That was one thing for us when we were doing Triple Espresso or any show. Really, it's like you just can't afford to lose your voice,
mm-mm,
and you can't afford to like get sick.
mm-mm,
So it's really it's an interesting discipline to do what to be a performer and have 8 shows a week or whatever,
yeah,
and never let yourself get ill or lose your voice.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you get
You
kind of good at that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I rarely get sick. You mentioned Dick Van Dyke. Is there someone like you had to watch like old movies and things like that? Is there anybody else that you identified with?
Well, I had kind of a tough childhood a little bit, and
Hmm.
I liked at that back in that period of time. I liked Dick Van Dyke and I liked Andy Griffith.
Right,
And they were both like dads and gentle and
right.
sweet and
Yeah.
funny. And those two guys were a real influence on me. And the Andy Griffith Show is kind of like Bobby Bean, right? The
Hmm.
character in Triple Espresso, that gentle humor.
Yes.
Um, it was a family show, and even now I still write like comedy routines and whatever, but it's all very Bobby Bean-ish. Like
Huh.
I, I I don't think I've ever sworn in a set that I wrote.
Right.
Like no swear words. It's just like I love being able to do comedy without having to resort to those types of things. In my real life, I swear like crazy, but you
Yeah.
know, but I still kind of have that standard for myself as a performer to like be inclusive and you know, and that kind of warm, loving humor that I think that Triple Espresso taught me and taught us. Like
Yeah.
I sometimes will say it was an advanced class in beginning comedy.
Hmm.
You know what I
It's a
mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
it's a extremely well crafted show. I mean,
yes,
if you start like analyzing it and breaking it down about like where they put things and why they put things there to elicit this and pull from that and have it overlap, it's just really fascinating. Because if you look at it on the surface, you go, "Oh yeah, it's a funny show," but if you really start looking at it, you go, "It's very well crafted." How I mean, the first act ending, the way that ends, and
yeah,
just
yeah,
and then the finale. I mean, it's just all of it, and then you got the kicker
totally.
at the end. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's
I'll
really
share with
good.
you that like when I got the audition for the show, they sent me a script. I guess it was on paper because I don't think we had other options back then. And I read the script and I thought this is the worst thing I've ever read.
Right,
Right? If you
right.
look at what happens in
You're like,
printed
what? Yeah.
form, it looks like no one would ever laugh at this. And
Hmm.
then I saw the show and it blew my mind. When I saw Bill, Bob, and Mike do it.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, when I read the script, I thought this is absolutely terrible, and that was a big lesson too. To realize that like you can't always tell by reading the script whether a
Hmm.
show's good.
Yeah.
You
I do
must.
that with plays where I read it and then we end up doing it. And I'm like, oh, this is totally different from like
Yeah,
what we were reading. It's
yeah,
very strange.
yeah. You can really miss it by reading because it's
Hmm.
the human element, the performances. That's
Yeah.
not on the page.
Yeah.
Just what you say is on the page. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
I'll forever be grateful for the opportunity to audition for the show and uh, yeah, at the Han back before it was the wait, what is it? Horton Grand now. It was the
Right.
Han
It was the
before
Han
that.
before, right? Yeah.
Uh, they Triple Espresso had come to San Diego and they were doing that show at the
Yeah.
Han.
Yeah.
And they said they were looking for other actors. And this was early, right? This was
Right.
like at first it was just those three guys doing it, but then they realized they needed some more actors. And they asked a woman who worked there named Ginger.
Hmm.
They were like, "Do you know anybody who should audition?" And she said, "Duane, you should really see this guy, Duane."
Hmm.
And they called me, and I was leaving to go to Chicago to do the Buddy Holly story at the Apollo Theater in Chicago. So I said, "No, thanks. I got a gig. I'm good." And then Triple Espresso, the original three guys, they came to Chicago and they called me while I was in Chicago and they said, "Would you like to audition?" And I said, "No, thanks," because I was going back to San Diego to do a show at the Rep.
Yeah.
I said, "No, thanks. I got a job, so no thanks." So they kind of came after me for maybe 6 months or whatever before I finally auditioned. And then
Yeah.
once I knew what was going on, I was like, wait a minute, this is the job I want.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got cast, and you know how that goes. You do the training, the rehearsals for a period
Right.
of time, and
Yep.
then they put Sticky out there on the stage and see how you do. And it went fine. And when you think about a show that I got to do for like 11 or 12 years, it's that doesn't happen. That just
No.
doesn't,
No.
especially, and we were paid generously as well. So
Yeah.
that was incredible. What an opportunity. And like probably when I look back at my life, out of the 3 or 4 top things that ever happened, getting cast in Triple Espresso was one of them.
Yeah, obviously for me, game changer because I'm married to the stage manager and have a child,
Yeah,
together. So big game changer. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And
And you
same for
know that
me.
I think uh, I think I recommended Jen for the job at Triple Espresso because she had been working at the Fritz Theater for me as a stage manager,
Yeah.
and then they were saying we need a stage manager, and I'm like, you should hire Jen, and then Jen
Yeah.
worked for 10 years or whatever on
Yeah.
her own.
She
Yeah,
ran the whole operation
yeah,
because I mentioned earlier there were several shows running. So she managed all those productions. That there was one in Des Moines, there was one here, one here, one here, and then the one in San Diego. So
right,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
thing.
What a
So
time! What a time
yeah,
that was.
yeah, it was
Well,
pretty amazing.
let's write a sequel.
I know.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
where Bobby, Hugh, and Buzz now?
Where are they now? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as somebody should.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember running into Bill at a party, and somebody because Christopher Hart, I went to his birthday party. Christopher played one of the roles, played Buzz. Um, and Chris had a birthday party. I went there, as everybody there, and I remember talking to Bill. Bill and I discovered this years later when I was on in the show, and I remember thinking to myself, I would never do that because I got my own thing going, just like you. It was like I'm doing my own thing because my own thing stopped, and I was like, well, now I'm available. But
right.
yeah, so it's interesting how that works. But
Well, Charles, you're
yeah,
doing a lot of like acting now, like straight up like acting. I kind of follow you on social
yeah,
media. Whatever.
yeah,
Uh, Before Triple Espresso, I knew you as a magician,
right.
but were you like in the acting world the whole
I
time?
was, yeah, I was.
No?
I've always been an actor, and then when I was young, I got into magic and I fooled around with it. Then I moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting in film and TV because I had studied with some people in Dallas. Adam Roark, who was a big star in the 50s and 60s. He's in that movie with Peter Fonda, Crazy Larry, and Dirty Mary or something or whatever that's called. It's like a big movie at the time, and a bunch of other things like The Stunt Man. But he came to Dallas and taught a class, film acting class, Dallas Film Actors Lab,
Right. Okay.
and it was about film technique. And I learned a lot. Studied with him for a couple of years, and I'm going to go to LA, and so I did. But when I was there, I was like, I need a gig, I need a job, And so I started working at Hollywood Magic, which was a big magic shop right next to Frederick's on
Right.
Hollywood Boulevard. I mean, like everybody and their brother came through there, and it had been there since the 30s,
Yeah.
1930s. And so anyway, yeah, and I just kind of got sidetracked, and then I got to a point after just banging around and doing plays and doing film and TV and stuff. I just went, man, I could be doing this for another 10 years and not be anywhere farther along than I am. And
Yeah.
the girl I was with at the time, she says, we could put an act together because I was seeing all my friends working cruise ships, making, $2,000 a week and doing shows and doing them. I'm like, man, they're making a lot of money doing that. I could make a living doing that. So I turned my attention to that for a long time and it started to become very successful with it. And I was enjoying it. I missed acting though. I felt like I was still acting because I was playing a role, the whole thing of like magicians, an actor playing a role. So I was playing a character, but it wasn't acting. It wasn't like digging into a play and stuff. So once Triple Espresso ended here, I went, do I really want to go back to LA? There's so much theater here in San Diego. So I decided to stay and dig in. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you stay busy.
I try to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've got all this for the holidays for Santa. So
Oh, I see. Yeah.
that's
I
that's
figured.
why that's why I have this. So yeah.
I figured there was a role. It's either Tevye or Santa. I don't know.
I I just auditioned for Tevye, but
Did you?
they did not accept my talents. So
Oh, I see.
I have no idea why, but that's fine.
Yeah.
It
You're
happens.
not.
Move
You're not
move
old
on.
enough.
What's
Yeah.
that?
You're not old enough.
Yeah, I'm a little
Yeah.
young, but I it would have been fun to do it. I like that show. What brought you to San Diego?
Um. I was like, I think I was about 17 or 18 years old, and I planned on going to Los Angeles, but I didn't know anybody in LA, and
Yeah,
I had friends in San Diego. So that's why
gotcha.
I moved to San Diego. I had
Yeah,
friends there, I moved, into with a friend, into a friend's house and slept on their couch for like,
Hmm.
6 months or whatever while I got things figured out.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this just up the road is LA and I'll, whatever. And then I ended up staying in San Diego for like, whatever, 20 years or whatever it was.
Right. But I
So
mean,
that's what brought
obviously,
that.
so much came out of that. I mean, it was the wise move. I mean, you started the Fritz Theater when? When did you start the Fritz?
91.
91. And I have
Yeah.
to explain, I can't even, it's so hard to explain because there's really nothing like it. There have been some theaters that have kind of been like it, but you were doing like edgy stuff, but not like doing edgy stuff just to do edgy stuff. You were doing edgy stuff, things that other people weren't doing. The rep was around at that time, right?
Mhm.
With
Yep.
Olive Blackstone, she was doing stuff
Oh,
that because we've talked about Jen and I, you know, first person to do like Torch Song Trilogy back in the day, and that was
right.
pretty like wow, and other things she's talked about, and the Fritz was doing that. Well, now since then we've had around that time Sledgehammer was another theater that was doing like really gutsy stuff and avant-garde. But what made you start the Fritz? Was it just like I want to do my own thing, or
Well, the way that happened actually was it wasn't really technically me that started the Fritz. I had a friend there who had made a deal with the landlord to open a theater,
hmm
and I helped like build out the space and I helped design what the space was going to look like. And this was back when it was on Seventh Avenue. Like right
right,
now, it would be a foul ball from the ballpark. It would be like
right, yeah, yeah,
behind the third base dugout was kind of where the Fritz Theater was
okay,
initially. Um, and so I helped, like design, get the lights up and, like take a building and turn it into a theater and worked on that really hard. And we did one show and then the show kind of tanked somehow. And the person who had set up the deal kind of left, said, I'm out. I forget it. I don't want to do this after all. And then so I went to the landlord and said, there's a theater there. I'll run it. And he said, okay, we made a deal. And that's how I started running the Fritz. Yeah. But it
right,
wasn't me that like began the place. It was
yeah.
somebody else. And then I just inherited it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
well, thank God you did, because I mean, you gave a start to probably dozens and dozens of actors, and you brought people in, and you did wild stuff, and yeah, and then the Fritz Blitz, as we talked about, huge, which ran for years and years. It was, and gave voice to young playwrights and so
Yeah.
forth. Yeah. So, very amazing. Is there
Yeah.
a role that you've always wanted to play that you've not gotten to play?
Um, let's see. Nothing too nothing. There's nothing that I'm just chomping at the bit to play. Maybe I'd like to play Prospero. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I like
Oh
in the
yeah.
uh, that's sort of a role I'd like to do. I was in that Tempest on the Beach production. Were you around when that happened?
No, I wasn't, but I've heard about it. Yeah,
Yeah, it was such an amazing production directed by Sean
yeah,
Murray
yeah.
um and it was on the beach at Coronado. I played Caliban and my entrances and exits were into and out of the ocean.
Right. I heard
I
that.
mean,
That's what I
oh,
heard. Yeah.
yeah. And then the sun set in Act 3 and Act 5 was lit by fire. I mean, it
So
was
great.
incredible. And people
Yeah.
still, 20 plus years later, people still talk about that show.
Yeah.
And a great cast. Linda Castro was Prospero, and
Mm,
it's one of the first times that I had seen like cross gender casting in that kind of regard. So it was really just an amazing production, and so Prospero is I don't know if I really actually want to work that hard, but it seems like a lot of freaking work. But that's kind of on my list. I got to play George in Virginia Woolf about 5 years ago,
oh, nice. Yeah.
and that was kind of on my list of roles I wanted to play.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
I got to do that one, and that was really amazingly satisfying as well. So
Yeah.
I don't think I've got much. If somebody was doing Urinetown, I would love to play Officer Lockstock. I just think
Hmm.
that's a fun
Yeah.
role.
Interesting.
But yeah, there's nothing really on my like bucket list that I
Yeah.
can. Yeah,
I don't
no.
have one either. I mean, like you mentioned, how much work it would be. I thought about that we were talking about Tevye. I'm like, I audition and I go, this is a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah,
Tevye like carries the show. I mean, he's like, you better have some. It's like, so, I'm like, okay, but yeah, interesting.
You're too young, Charles. Like anytime I don't get cast in something, I'm like, oh, I must be too young.
Right.
Romeo, I'm too young to play
Yeah.
Romeo. Yeah,
I
yeah.
did. I did a video audition, which I for theater, I hate, but I wasn't available to be at the live call, so I hate doing this. I set it up right. It was good. I mean, the setup was good, but it's so you don't get personality, you don't get all of that, and I'm singing in the audition, so it's even muted more. So,
Right.
um, what's your best role you've ever played that you like go, oh, that was man, I love playing that. That was great.
Well, Bobby Bean for sure.
Yeah.
From Triple Espresso. Besides that, I would say probably Sweeney Todd. I've done Sweeney three
Oh,
times.
that's right. I forgot you did Sweeney Todd. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that three
Yeah.
times. I I might audition for it. There's an audition coming up. I'm thinking about trying to play Sweeney one more time. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I'm way too old probably, but I'm going to audition and we'll see if they. But I'm fantasizing that they'll use me. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Where did
But
you
that
do Sweeney Todd? You did it here in San Diego, I know, right?
time I did it in San Diego at the Palomar College,
All right. Yeah.
and then I did it twice with the Fritz Theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we did it two times.
One of the
Yeah,
advantages of having your own theater company.
definitely.
It's like, we're doing this. I'm playing Sweeney
I'm
Todd.
playing
So
100%. Yeah,
no
and
arguments.
Linda Gill was our
Oh,
Mrs. Bennett. It was incredible.
oh,
What a
great.
great cast! Steve Gunderson as the judge.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I mean, it was a really good cast. Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
I'll have to next time I see Melinda, I'll have to mention. So yeah, I see her
yeah.
every once in a while because we work at this gig together. So at
Oh, cool.
UCSD.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. Anyway,
As good a Mrs. Lovett as you will ever find.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's great. Is there a
yeah.
role that you or a show that you just went never again, or just it was just horrible?
Um, yeah, kind of. I mean, it was one. I worked at a theater company and I became the artistic director. And when I became artistic director, they had a show that ran every Christmas, had been running for like 10 years, and it was a big hit and people loved it. And it was called Bloody Mary Christmas. And
Hmm.
when I became artistic director, I directed it one year, and then I just couldn't get into it. I kept trying, but I just couldn't get into it. I think it showed in the production. It wasn't very good, and I
Yeah.
wasn't very good directing it. And so yeah, that one was it had been a hit for years and years, and then I took over and it tanked, and no one does it anymore at Christmas time.
Was it here in San Diego?
No, no, that was in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Okay. Yeah. Because I don't
yeah,
recall that. Yeah. I,
yeah,
I have I have a couple of those. Yeah. So, but that's interesting. So you were here for years. I know that while you were here, your network increased. Is this where you met Candace?
yeah.
Now, Candace Candace Paul is how she goes by, but we refer to her as Candace. She's
Right,
a major casting agent here. There's a few here, but she's a big one. A lot of casting. People come down to San Diego and they want to do something. So they end up, casting through her.
right.
It's not as much anymore because a lot of production companies kind of shut down, and productions that come down, they kind of have their own people that she kind of fills in gap. But she does work a lot. That's what she does for a living and makes a very good living. She was an actress for a long time. I know she was part of the Fritz,
Yep,
and even my stepfather was like on the board. Stepfather in law, I should say,
right.
Charlie Rando.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Charlie
uh,
gave one of my favorite performances ever at the Fritz Theater.
yeah,
We did
yeah,
God's Country, and he played
hmm
the radio DJ in that. And
yeah,
oh my God,
yeah,
just like
yeah.
beautiful and heartbreaking. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Janice
So
told me about
Charlie
that.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
incredible. I think literally, if someone were to say what's the best performance in the history of the Fritz Theater, I think I would go to Charlie.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah,
wow. I'll
yeah,
have to
yeah.
tell him that when I see him.
Yeah,
So,
I've told him a
uh,
few times. So yeah, but
yeah,
you can mention it again because
I'll
it's
make him
still.
happy.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
He's still doing stuff. I mean, he did Heisenberg for me. We did Heisenberg with Danae Steele uh, and Charlie, and
Which play is that?
it was on Broadway. Why am I blanking on her name? Anyway, she's in Weeds. I forget her name.
Okay.
You know the show Weeds.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't.
Okay, sure.
I'm forgetting her name now. Anyway, she originated. It's basically it. It's a man, a younger woman and an older Irishman who lives in London, who's lived in London most of his life, a pretty solitary existence, is a butcher. Um, they run into each other at a train stop, and she just starts talking his ear off. There's no
Oh,
sets,
oh,
there's no costumes, there's no props. There's like maybe two props.
oh,
And it's six scenes, and they end up falling in love, and there's some twists and turns, but it's just a lot of them being together. And they basically just sit across the stage, and she's like, hi, and she just starts talking to him. It was really fascinating. And it was, you know, Charlie just was amazing. Yeah, you're talking about how amazing he was, because I was having a very hard time trying to find somebody that could do an Irish slash British accent, be of the right age, have presence, be old enough to be believable to say when he says I'm 75 or whatever, but also have his wits about him and be good looking enough, have a presence that a young woman in her 40s would go, this is a handsome older man that I want to be with. And
yeah,
so nobody was nobody was hitting it right. And I looked at Troy and go, do you want to come? And he said, yeah, I'll come. And so he came. Um, and he was the first one in the room. And when he left, Jen and the artistic director, Jill Drexler, and I think one other person, we just went.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I go, should we just tell everybody else to go home?
yeah.
But we had to audition everybody else. It was like, what? Just done. He just nailed it. I mean, it's just so good. So,
That's Charlie, man. He's got
yeah.
it. He's got all the elements. Yeah,
Hmm.
beautiful, beautiful actor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So very cool.
yeah.
And you worked around town too. I mean, you worked at the Rep. Did you
Yep.
ever work at North Coast?
No, I never did.
I know you did a lot of stuff at the Rep, and I know where else did you work here in town?
I worked at the Rep. I did about 12 shows at Starlight Musical Theater
Hmm. Right.
years ago. I had a gig at the Playhouse, Ojai Playhouse. I was in the first Grinch over at the Globe, um, and I think mostly I was focused on just the Fritz Theater.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was equity uh, at the time too, so it was there weren't that many opportunities for equity actors in San Diego
Right.
at the time.
Right. When did you become equity? How did you become equity?
At the Lawrence Welk Theater is where I got my equity card.
Oh, okay. Just by
Yeah, I
being in the
worked
show and doing the points and so forth.
all
Right.
that stuff. Yeah, wait, I think that's how I got my card. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I got it at the Welk. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I did probably 6 shows at the Lawrence Welk as well. Yeah,
Right.
so I was staying busy. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you
yeah.
prefer, this is probably a stupid question. I'm going to ask anyway. Do you prefer like musicals to straight plays, or is it
Okay.
just, it's
Oh.
kind of comparing apples and oranges, I think.
Yeah, I think it's comparing apples and oranges. It's like
Yeah.
if it's good, I like it.
Right.
The
Yeah.
thing about singing is more stressful than acting, though.
Yeah.
In acting, there are no wrong notes.
Right.
It's how you do it is how you do it. But when
Yeah.
you're singing and you're supposed to hit a B flat and you hit an A, something is terribly wrong.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I just didn't really want to follow the professional singing career, because I just felt there was so much more stress in being a singer than there is in being an actor. Being an actor, you can really interpret and feel, do it how you want to do it.
Yeah.
And with singing, if you hit a wrong note, everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you wrote a book called uh I'm Not Hamlet, and is it I'm Not Hamlet and Everybody Knows It?
You're not
Or
really
You're
Hamlet.
Not
Although,
Really Hamlet and Everybody Knows It. Yeah.
yeah, I think though
Uh
I'm not really Hamlet is probably a better title. I wish I'd thought of
right. Yeah. I'm not really Hamlet. Uh uh but I've glanced at it, but I haven't read it. I'm in the process of reading your second book, which I see behind you, which is
that.
a year in acting class, which is really good, which is an interesting format because if you don't know, it's I bought it on Kindle. It was like
Nice.
$10 on Kindle. So, want to go buy it. It's not that much. It's interesting, but it's as if you're immersed in the class, like you're
Yeah.
taking the class. So there are people talking and chiming in, and you're saying, well, "How do you feel about this?" And da, da, da. I'm about halfway through it, so it's really fun. So I'm
Good.
not as familiar with the Hamlet book, which was your first book. Was
Yes.
that more of like just a study of like your reflections on acting and
The as you read a year in acting class, you might note that I have sort of a unique approach to acting using video and
hmm
inviting the wrong readings and those types of things. Like
right?
that I think is I sort of have a language that is different than the language that of most other acting classes.
Hmm.
My first book is more of a of that. It's like what I think about acting and how it's different, I think, than from other acting schools of thought. Um, but it's just from my perspective. The new book, A Year in Acting Class, is like perspective of the actors more, and like
Right.
actual conversations about
Right.
acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but it's always, like I've been writing like because I didn't really study acting. I never had classes really. I never took like Meisner or Stanislavski or whatever. So I kind of had to develop my own language and my own way of approaching being an actor. And once I realized it was unique to other schools, then I thought, well, I'll write this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
got
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It feels a little different, doesn't it? The way
It, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting, backstage, it's what got me teaching. I haven't taught a lot, but I've taught some. And it's what started me teaching. I started just having I was doing Curse of the Starving class, I think, and backstage, and I started talking to an actor, and I looked up, and like five other actors were listening to me, and I was like, don't you guys know this stuff? So
right.
I thought, well, maybe there's a market for people that don't know a lot of this stuff. And I just started kind of putting that in, like, what do you do? So what do you
Yeah.
do when you get a script and you break it down? What do you start to do? What are some things that you look at?
Well, I think for me, like the first time or two or three times through the script, I try not to have any opinions or preconceptions. Excuse me. I just try to let it like wash over me.
Right.
Then uh pretty soon I start to like shoot the video, which is the memories that are required. Like as you see in my book, like to me the truth is a video. Like,
Right.
what happened to you when you were 15? Well, you're going to go to the movie in your brain
Yeah.
and like narrate that movie, and that's how you say, well, I was on the track team and I had a girlfriend named Susan or whatever.
Hmm.
The truth is always in the video, so I begin to shoot the video for my character so that I can have the memories I need to then be truthful when I say this happened to me, right?
Right.
Because what is an experience, later, but a video, a memory, your memory is a video, and
Right.
your video is a memory. So that's what I start to do. I start to try to truthfully shoot the video so that I can tell the truth when I'm playing the part.
Right. And it comes down to sort of like a believability thing, which is, if you have that backstory, it sort of layers in that next thing of like who you are and so forth. And obviously in a script, you don't get all of that. So you have to take from the text and go, oh, the guy likes to do this. So he must do this. So yeah, there's clues. It's all in the
Yeah,
text, but very
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Like anybody could say the lines,
right.
but who's going to be believable, and what
Right.
is it to be believable, and what
Yeah.
is it to even believe it yourself?
Right. Yeah.
And so I try to, I want to start there and create truth for my character, and then you can manipulate the truth in order to make it more powerful.
Right.
You know, like decide to change your video of an experience so that you can, you know, so the script becomes its most powerful. So that's pretty much what I try to do. And then when I'm acting, I'm trying to just live in the memories and let my language be a manifestation of what I'm already thinking, what I've already seen, how I already feel.
Right. I remember reading something about having a conversation with someone, like if you have to have a difficult conversation with someone about an incident or an issue, it never goes how you have it in your head.
Uh-huh.
So it never ends up the way, it never comes out the way. You don't say the thing you practice. I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this, but it never comes out that way. It always is
Right,
different.
right, right.
And the result is different. So that to me is like acting, because it's like you can't predict, what that how. So you can't make those predictions like, oh, it's going to be like this, because it's all going to be fluid.
Right.
So the same way. So, but if I just come from that place of like truth, I know what I want to say. So our
Yeah.
language is not predictable, as we
No.
talk. So yeah, that's kind of along those lines. That's interesting. But
Yeah. In
yeah.
You're Not Really Hamlet, I cited a study that says that the average person has 48.6 thoughts per minute.
Hmm.
48.6 thoughts per minute, virtually a thought per second.
Right.
But an actor doing a monologue will think, I think this one thing for 3 minutes.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But in real life, our brains are changing
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
synapsing back and forth and left and right. And so I try to create a process that invites that 48.6 thoughts per minute into the life of the character. We don't
Yeah.
think one thing for 3 minutes. We just
No.
really don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
and that's a way that I think again, my approach to acting is unique to most others.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, well, the proof is in the pudding, because there is something about you on stage that it's that intangible thing, that you can't put your finger on it. It's like, oh, well, it's the way he talks or it's the way he moves. It's like, yes, but no, there's just something when you put it all together and then you start layering in all that other stuff and then you get a performance, So yeah, and it's amazing. Now you did a bunch of shorts when you were, before you landed Veronica Mars, but how different was it? I mentioned Candace because you knew her, but she brought you in, and I think she was helpful in getting you cast on Veronica Mars. I mean, I don't think she like pushed. I mean, maybe she did push you, but she uh, brought you in, for the role. They go, hey, we're looking for this. And she's, oh, this guy will be good. And you came in. So, I mean, that's a pretty, I don't know if there was some special circumstances surrounding you getting that role, uh, or if it was just you auditioned and they liked you. So, is there
Yeah,
anything to that or?
yeah. All I know of, Candace never gave me any like behind the scenes necessarily. All I know of was that she called me in for the audition,
Right.
probably told the producers that I was a good guy or whatever.
Yeah.
She might have recommended me, but she's not the one making the decision. But
No, no.
I sometimes tell this story that as I was in the waiting area to go into the audition, there was another actor that I knew there really, pretty well, and up for the same role. And he sat next to me, and and we were waiting for like 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever. And the whole time we were sitting there talking, he was talking about himself and how great he was as an actor and what he was doing and what he was gonna do. And uh, for 30 minutes, he never asked me anything about myself.
Mm,
I, and I was just like sitting there, kind of going, "Are you ever gonna say anything? Are you ever?" And then on and on and on about what he was doing, where he was going, what was, and so when the casting associate came out and said, "Oh, okay, Duane, we're ready for you." As I stood up, I thought to myself, "I cannot let this guy get the part. I cannot let him get it. I just can't. I didn't even get it for me. I get it because I didn't want him to."
right. Right.
So there was that competitive thing, and I talk a lot in my work too about testosterone and the need to
Right.
like
Yeah.
be like competitive.
Yeah.
um and that was, and I went in there, and I didn't, because I didn't know it was going to become a series and play for years and launch
Yeah.
career. I had no idea. It was just a little thing I was auditioning for, but I was like, I can't let that guy get it.
Mm, that's funny. I've been on a couple of those where like, oh man, no. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's great. So
uh,
you did that, but your work and other shorts and going into that, how difficult was it? Because uh, was there a big shift, a big learning curve for you? Did you kind of fall? By the end, I've watched the show. I've watched you. You look great in the show. I mean, it's like you look like that. To me, that's always the thing. Is like, oh, that guy totally looks like he belongs there. Because sometimes you watch stuff and you go, you know,
yeah,
when you know somebody, they
yeah,
kind of stick out. You don't
yeah.
stick out at all. You're just like, that's they did a good job casting him. It's like a good role for him. So
I'm
that's right.
glad you feel that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I actually, before Veronica Mars, I had not done a lot of on camera. I'd been
Yeah.
mostly stage. I'd done a few things.
Hmm.
But when I was on Veronica Mars, I really did have a hard time adjusting. I tended to over project, um, and and like, and then too, like being a stage performer, I'm used to having an audience,
Right.
but there's not an audience, and the crew is not an audience,
No.
right? They're there to do their jobs. They're not there to observe and applaud and
Mm-mm.
gasp and laugh.
Right.
So it felt really, I was really sort of out of my element for a while. I got better, but for a while there, I was pretty out of my element because I didn't kind of understand who I was trying to reach,
Right. Yeah.
so yeah, it threw me off a little bit, but
Uh,
over the more than decade or whatever I
yeah.
was involved somehow with the show, I eventually got a bit more of a handle on it. Um, and now I feel like I have a lot more experience on camera and I can handle it. But yeah, at the time it was different, very different. And
Yeah.
it sort of threw me off. I couldn't tell if I was doing well or not because there's no laughs, there's no
Right.
applause.
It's really unnerving the first few times, you do something and you feel like if it's a difficult scene and you've done something, you go, oh, do you get it all in and you do that and you're like done and then okay, moving on. And you're like, was that good? Are you happy? Do we need
Right.
to do it again? And it's
But
like,
yeah,
yeah, what happened? They're moving on to the next thing because daylight is burning, time is money, so as they say. So yeah.
and things like hitting marks and whatever,
Yeah.
that was the stuff that took me a while to get used to. Again, I'd done a few things before Veronica Mars, but
Hmm.
I'd spent my whole life up to then really being a stage actor, and
Right. Yeah.
you don't have
Yeah.
marks on the stage.
Yeah.
Rarely.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
but you had a good time on that show, right? Yeah.
Well, I really did love it. I will admit that also too. It's kind of like what we said earlier about Triple Espresso. It's like you have good days and bad days, and there's days that you love it and days that you don't. And again, it was all me. It wasn't the gig. It was me and my relationship to the gig and my relationship to myself at the gig.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all easy. I wish if I had a chance to go back and do it over again, I would have more fun and I would
Yeah.
enjoy myself more. Um, but yeah, I sometimes had an angsty few moments, in relationship to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That
yeah.
second guessing
Uh,
yourself and that anxiety a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there
Yeah.
was a lot of that. There was a lot of that happening, but eventually I got a little better at those ideas. Yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
that's great. Did
yeah.
you now you also you moved to LA and lived up there for a while and pursued things there. And then I know you moved to Phoenix and did you took over as the artistic director or did you start another theater there?
When I moved to Phoenix, I went there to take care of my mom,
Yes.
and so I started working at a theater there. Um, and then they needed an artistic director and they asked me to do it. The theater was already in place. I sort of
Gotcha.
changed the way they did things,
Hmm.
but I did not start the theater by any stretch.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a
Uh,
play that you're very proud of while you were there or elsewhere here at the Fritz? I mean, I know you talked about God's Country, which was a great play, but is there another play that you directed that you are is really a pinnacle?
yeah, I don't know. The Fritz, sometimes as producer, I can take credit for things.
Hmm.
Several things that I directed, I think, did well and were big hits. But as a producer, we did Vigil.
Mm.
I produced, and it was directed by Rosina
Hmm.
Reynolds, who's a San Diego icon, and
Yes.
starred Ron Schularton.
Yes.
And I think Jen did lights on it. Actually,
Yeah.
I think she was a lighting designer.
She did,
And
and then I think she also stage managed as well later. So yeah.
yeah, and that show really took off. I mean, it was the kind of show you couldn't get a ticket to. You had to.
Hmm.
It was just, and there was no real rhyme or reason to like why or how. It just opened and it was sold out.
Yeah.
Like nobody knew it was good. No one had ever done the play before. It was the U.S. premiere,
Hmm.
and um, and it was an amazing show. But I don't know how the public knew that, but from the get go. But certain shows click and certain shows don't, and that one really clicked, and
Yeah.
it was brilliant. It's still one of the best shows maybe I've ever seen. With Ron Schularton and Catherine Faulkner, who's passed
Yeah.
away.
I didn't see it. I saw it with Pat. I saw it with Ron Schularton and Pat DeMeo.
Got it. Yeah.
Ron is still going strong. Pat
Oops.
passed away a few years back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw it at Sixth at Penn,
Got it.
that little theater, and it was great. I mean, it was like you were sitting in that room with them because it's a very intimate theater. It's only like 3 rows and 60
Yeah.
seats,
Yeah.
and it was brilliant. It was brilliant. I know that's not the show you produced, but it was.
I
It
think I did
was.
produce that as well. Yeah.
Did you produce that one as well? It was great. I mean, we still joke about the Julie Andrews moment.
Okay.
Christmas is over. So yeah, uh, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great script. I can't get the rights to it anymore.
Oh wow,
I had to produce it once or twice in the last few years, and the rights are not available.
oh wow,
Yeah,
interesting. Hmm.
I think the writer was hoping for a movie or whatever. I don't know, but
Interesting.
I've tried at least two or even three times. I want That's a role I'd love to play, actually.
Yeah, I
I'd
can
love
see
to play
that.
that part. If Ron's not available, if Ron's available, get Ron. But
Right.
if I would love to play that part, and I've tried to get the rights to it, and it's not
That's fun.
available.
That's
Yeah,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So from Phoenix, you were there. Now you're out on the road and being here and being there. I know one of the things that you do is you go over to France and teach. And you mentioned to me the other day, you said you're over there for months at a time. Did you say like 6 months at a time?
Well,
So,
I'm either there anywhere between 1 and 6 months a year.
right,
Um,
right,
so I spend quite a bit of time in France. Yeah,
right.
yeah. It depends on, the school is there, but it depends on how many acting students they have. That's
Yes,
how, they don't always have enough acting students to bring me, but when they do, then I get to go there. So
right.
I scheduled to go back in January. I hope there's enough actors in the acting program for me to go again in January.
And
But yeah, I've been
you're
doing that
there in
for
the French
15 years.
countryside and in the it's like you're not in Paris or something. I know you're out in the country and you said it's really quite beautiful and
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing, and France is a great place to be, and
yeah.
yeah, I really love going there and spending time. So yeah, I've been doing that for 15 years.
Yeah. You're
Yeah,
teaching acting, obviously.
I
And
still I teach classes on Zoom like every week.
yeah,
Well, yeah, yeah. So yeah,
that's
try to stay busy, keep going.
yeah. What is
Yeah,
next for you besides going hopefully going off to France? You mentioned auditioning for things, but you have anything lined up at this
I don't
point?
have anything lined up right now. Uh, yeah, I don't really know. I do have a musical theater piece that I'm one of the creators of that
Hmm.
I've gotten to see produced twice, and it does really well. But I'm trying to get more theaters to pick up this show and do it.
Yeah.
It's called Country Blues Saloon,
Oh, you
and it's a
mentioned that. Yeah,
musical.
we talked about
Yeah,
that.
it's a
Yeah.
musical, a country blues musical. And my brother wrote the songs, and
Right.
I kind of helmed the book. And the show does really really well. And but marketing the show is one thing I'm working on. And then
Wow.
I also have the screenplay, a rock and roll sci-fi screenplay.
Oh, that's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Teenagers from Space, and I'm trying to get some traction for that as well.
That's
So
cool. Cool.
yeah, trying to launch some big projects. And then I just finished this year in acting class, so
Right.
I
Yeah.
feel that was a lot of work, of course.
Go
So
buy the book. Go buy
yeah,
the
go
book.
by the book. Good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
So
buy
you're
the other book too.
yeah, buy them all, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
You said you're about halfway through it. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through a year in acting
Yeah,
class.
yeah.
It's yeah, it's really interesting. I like reading, different takes and so forth. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Good.
So what advice, speaking from years of directing and your years of acting, what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe starting out, done a few plays, wanting to like do more, maybe, pursue a professional career? Is there like if you could talk to your younger self, kind of thing like, oh, be sure, don't do this, go and do this and get this done, so put you on a faster track. There's some things I wish I had done when I got to town. Because kind
Yeah,
of just like when I got to town, I was kind of like, once I didn't do anything while Triple Espresso was running because I just felt the obligation. I thought I really can't like do a play, I'm like they kind of counting on me to do this, and they were paying me well, so I thought, well, but when it's over, but then I kind of just did stuff. I didn't pay attention to who was who or where it was what. I needed to go and like I wish somebody had said, hey, you need to, go to
yeah.
this theater, go here, go there. So do you have advice like that or?
Well, I think I really kind of think every single actor is like a snowflake.
Hmm.
There's no two actors that are exactly the same. So it kind
Very
of
true.
depends on where you're coming from.
Right.
But when people ask me sometimes if I would tell my younger self something, I would say this to my younger self. There's no good reason, Duane, for you to not be confident.
Yes.
I struggled with confidence at times. And even though I was working a lot and I was, good and, got good reviews and whatever, I still struggled a lot with confidence early on. And I thought there were lots of good reasons for me to not be confident.
Yeah.
Uh, but I would tell my younger self, there is no good reason for you to not
Yeah.
be confident.
Yeah.
So if anybody's struggling with confidence, that's something that I would suggest that they kind of try to think about. And both of my books actually deal a lot with confidence,
Right. Yeah.
because I think it's one of the most important things an actor can have.
Yeah.
So that would be my blanket advice to young people starting out. And then like each actor like is facing a different challenge, a different breakthrough. So yeah, maybe I would say read my book.
There you go. I'm not.
Wasn't
I can't answer that question. You have to buy the book.
right,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. This is the
Yeah.
plug for the book. So no,
Yeah.
it's great. Um, and is there anybody that you've worked with besides me that you've really enjoyed working with?
No.
No. I know you did a lot of stuff with Dane because you guys would do stuff around town and you kind of had a little show that you did every once in a while. So, but is there like one? Because I have a few people like, oh, I really enjoyed working with them or something, but
Yeah.
I don't have it. I was curious.
Well, you mentioned Dane, of course, and I would take any opportunity to be on stage with Dane.
Yeah.
We did that little two-man show called Dane and Duane. The only thing missing is you.
Right. Yes. Very funny. Yeah.
I,
I saw it. You did it at Six and Penn. Yeah. I think
yeah,
that's
we
where it
did.
was. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we did it a few places, but that was one of them.
yeah.
Yeah, Steve Gavea, I love too. I don't know if you know Steve, uh, but he's a San Diego guy, and he was in like the tour of Jersey Boys and Broadway, original
Oh, I
Broadway.
met him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's an amazing person and a great performer. And when I came to San Diego and did like a one man show last year, he was my other man. I asked you if you could do it, you couldn't,
Yeah.
but I got Steve, who was my second choice.
Hmm.
But Steve is really an amazing guy to work with too. He's a
That's
lovely
great.
human being and amazingly talented. So those are, I guess, probably you, Dane, and Steve would be my top choices off the
I
top of
was
my head.
kidding.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
appreciate it. So.
yeah. But we did have a great time doing those
We
shows.
did have a
So
great time. Yeah. It took such a long time to like find that perspective of like being, grateful what we were talking about earlier. So that's
yeah,
great. Well, you
yeah.
have any parting thoughts?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I appreciate your, you just asking me to be on with you. I'm really,
Oh, it was great.
yeah,
Yeah.
had
I
a great
mean,
time catching up with you, Charles.
thank you. It was wonderful. Well, this has been Duane Daniels. Go and check out some of the links that we're going to put down below. And this has been Stage Perspective. And check out some of the other videos that are here and tell your friends. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Charles.
Bye bye.